What is Metaphysics? Section 1 of A Plurigamia to a New Metaphysics by Javier Rivera, Thomas Jockin, and O.G. Rose. It's hard to think of a more loaded word in philosophy than metaphysics, and it can mean 100 different things to 100 different people. To start, it would be useful to review some possible understandings of the term. To start, the section next to the physics section in the library. The origin of the term, following Martha Nussbaum, is undramatically just a library designation. Obviously, though, the term has gained a lot more meaning over time. Second possibility, unfalsifiable theorizing. Metaphysics is mostly unfalsifiable, which means it is not a science in the same way physics is, according to Karl Popper. Does it follow, then, that metaphysics is a waste of time? Not at all, and even Popper, the father of falsification, didn't believe that everything true and meaningful could be falsified. The criteria of falsification was for defining science from pseudo-science, not for defining what can be true from what cannot be true, a popular misunderstanding regarding falsification. In fact, what's unfalsifiable can describe the most important things in my life, say my relationship to my wife, my passions, and so on. If there are things in our lives that matter, which cannot be falsified, then we must figure out how we are going to live with and approach those things. If we don't take the time to think about how we're going to do that, we'll still have ideas of how we ought to live with the unfalsifiable, but we'll likely construct and live out those ideas poorly. On these grounds, metaphysical considerations are valid, assuming they are indeed about things that matter, as we will discuss. Third possibility, a study of what is beyond the physical. The term metaphysics seems like a good umbrella term to describe everything that is beyond the physical. Today, though, we seem to think that everything ultimately has a physical origin, and that therefore there is nothing beyond the physical. As a result, we tend to discard metaphysics without the slightest worry that we're losing all that much. But we shouldn't be so hasty. Even if beauty ultimately has a physical origin, we do not experience beauty as just physical. In fact, it can strike us as transcendent. We do not experience love as chemicals in the brain. We do not experience success as a social construct. Telling us that our thoughts are composed of neurons does not tell us what we should do with our thoughts. And furthermore, there is an assumption embedded in this notion that things are really just what they're composed out of. But why couldn't it be the case that things are really what they build up into? Why must the smaller be more? Who has a right to claim that thoughts are more so neurons than to say that neurons are more so thoughts? Who has a right to say love is more so its evolutionary benefits than to say that evolutionary benefits are more so love? We have absorbed an ontological hierarchy where we assume parts are more real than wholes, which is perhaps a legacy of nominalism. The very fact we have ontological hierarchy without realizing it is evidence that we will possess some philosophy metaphysics, whether we realize it or not. There's a lot of talk today about emergent phenomenon, the wisdom of crowds and the like, but philosophy sometimes seems yet to get the memo. To decide that things really are what they are made out of is a metaphysical assumption that overlooks emergence and the like. And so if we view the world this way, then though we may think we have avoided metaphysics, we in the very act engage in metaphysics. If we believe that things are what they are made out of versus believe parts are what they make, we have accepted a framework to understand the physical which is not found in the physical. We have absorbed something beyond the physical. In this way, metaphysics is unavoidable, and if we don't take the time to own our metaphysics, we will still live with a philosophy, but probably not one we have thought through. As a result, we will probably reason poorly. Understanding 4 for metaphysics, a study of forms over and in contrast to matter. The idea of a cat isn't the same as a cat. The form by which a cat is comprehended is not identical to the matter which composes a cat. Moving forward, you'll notice I like making an example of cats. Without forms, the world of matter wouldn't make sense to me. Without ideas, my experiences would be meaningless. Even if I can locate the neuron in my head that corresponds with the idea of a cat, I will not find that idea in the neuron. Ultimately, ideas are not in the world and yet of it. Forms exist but aren't real, per se. They are beyond the physical, and yet forms make it possible to meaningfully organize and operate in the physical. Yes, we can associate forms and ideas, and if we do so, we can quickly realize how important metaphysics are. Just try to get through a day without thinking about it. And we should ask ourselves, does the composition and origin of ideas help us know what to do with them? If not, then metaphysics will prove critical and necessary, especially once we understand its relationship with phenomenology, as will be discussed. The 5th understanding of metaphysics, a study of what can only be understood through living it. In The Important and Profound Religion and Nothingness, Nishanti writes that the religious quest alone is the key to understanding it. There is no other way. By religion, Nishanti does not mean a dogmatic institution like the word typically conjures up in us. Instead, religion has to do with a concern that has to do with life itself. And it is a certain mode of being, a method of attention and concern perhaps akin to the ultimate concern of Paul Tillich. But to get into details of this subject, I suggest giving Religion and Nothingness a read. The main point I want to focus on is that religion can only be understood in a religious life. If we are not religious, we cannot understand it, and we'll even see good reason not to understand it. We have to be participating in it and toward the aims of religion. Otherwise, we will see no reason to assent to these aims. But doesn't this risk brainwashing? Easily, but perhaps this is the only way to brainwash ourselves, meaning clean ourselves of false ideas and Cartesian hangovers. Hard to say, and we certainly should be aware of possibilities of self-deception. But if we pay attention to how things unfold to us, as opposed to what we think about things, we will help ourselves avoid confirmation bias, precisely because the focus of our attention will be external to us. Admittedly, though, we could still fall into trouble, which suggests the desperate need for us to learn how to think, but exploring that topic is the focus of the True Isn't the Rational. The topic requires its own book series. Like religion, perceptive phenomenology must be tried and lived to be understood. If we never hold up our hand and really try to look at it while turning off all our thoughts, the distinction between thinking and perceiving will seem incorrect. And if that distinction seems misplaced, the entire project of a new metaphysics will be straw. To fully grasp what is articulated in this treatise and the works inspired by it, we must try what is described. In conclusion, for this section, metaphysics is the unfalsifiable study of what is non-physical, with a special focus on the forms that render matter intelligible. Additionally, Nussbaum provides us with a thought that can suggest the importance of phenomenology in our new metaphysics, which we will explore next. Discussing Dostoevsky, Nussbaum writes, "It is extremely rare for us to fix our attention on things as to lose ourselves in them. In other words, to become the very things we are looking at." Nussbaum associates this with the real self-awareness of reality, which suggests the proper subject of phenomenology. The phenomenology of a new metaphysics should not so much ask what things are like in of themselves through experience, but is after the apprehension of things, with the main subject being the nature of that very apprehension. This brings us to phenomenology.